What's up, guys? Welcome to the very first episode of Trail Wolf Garage episodes. Today we're going to be going over the legend, the one and only, the Big Red Pig XR650R. So you might be wondering, why the heck am I riding an XR650R through the woods? Maybe my parents dropped me on the head too many times as a child. Not sure, but truth be told, I just really enjoy doing things on this bike that you shouldn't do on this bike. I personally feel it's a very underrated motorcycle for technical stuff, and it can handle a lot more than just Baja, even though it obviously excels at that type of riding. And I found it to be like just kind of a good all-around bike. Are you gonna go jump triples on this thing? Probably not. Can you? Sure. Yeah, let's go ahead and break this puppy down just kind of piece by piece here and show you what's special about it and what's basically OEM. So let's get to it. So first and foremost, I'm really running stock suspension on this. I really think it's a little too soft for a lot of things I do. For the woods and the single track, having the stock suspension or being kind of on the softer, plusher side is nice for corners and stuff, but on the other hand, the bike kind of rides a lot lower than I need it, and so what ends up happening is when I'm going into those ruts in like the woods corners and they kind of have like not even a rut but just kind of a slight divot, it brings me a lot lower to the ground and I end up hitting the peg on a lot of things. So the suspension is great in a lot of ways. It takes a lot of the chatter out of the roads and stuff, but there are two companies out there that I do have in mind for the suspension. One of them is obviously the most reputable, I would say, amongst the 650Rs, which would be Precision Concepts. I have a friend down there, his name's Ryan, started working with Precision Concepts, and you can't, forget about Bob Bell and the legacy that he brought with that company, but that is definitely a solid choice for getting your suspension work on a 650R. The other company is a friend of mine that I made when I was working at a dealership down in Southern California, and his name is Mike Crow. He owns Crow Performance, and I actually got the opportunity to ride his suspension when I was pre-running the Baja 1000 this last year on my friend Dustin's bike. So thank you, Dustin, for letting me use your bike. But I got a chance to use his suspension settings, and it was amazing. That bike was handling how I had hoped any 650R would. Now keep in mind, I was in the terrain that it was intended for, which was Baja. That being said, I do feel like it was just plush enough to work like for what I want to do in the woods, while also having a little more stiffness to it to keep me up higher off the ground. Just something to keep in mind if you're building out your 650R when you're considering what to do with your suspension. Next up on the big girl, we got this motor here. This is where a lot of the weight comes from on this bike. I have kept this engine stock, and I've thrown some silicone coolant lines on here to kind of try to smoothen out the water flow on the bike and keep those temps down, but that's the only like cooling modification I've done. But because, as you saw in the first episode, we were dealing with some overheating issues, another thing I want to do is throw a radiator fan on here. There's a universal one made by Tusk Racing that my friend Dustin ran on his 650R, and he said good things about it, so I want to give it a shot on this thing, see if it improves the cooling. I also might actually switch to a different type of radiator fluid because I am just running basic coolant all in here. It's nothing special. I've never really had a problem with overheating in technical, but I think due to the like rigorous climbing that we're doing and putting strain on the motor without a lot of airflow, it's causing some overheating issues that I normally wouldn't encounter through slot canyons, because I think we're more on like a flat terrain. Even though we're going through technical, we're doing switchback climbing stuff. That's where I notice where this bike really starts to overheat. But other than that, that's pretty much the motor stuff. There's nothing special. It's a stock clutch in there, stock cam, stock piston size. It does what I needed to do. I obviously don't need more power for what we're doing in the woods there, so that should be a no-brainer. Also, I feel it's important to talk about the clutch. It is a stock clutch in there. There are better options for it. I haven't really like worn it out or anything enough to warrant me switching up my program in there. It is a stock clutch with that judder spring and everything in there. I am trying to run non-synthetic oil. I just want to try to get as much friction as I can in the clutch. It's important on these things to not run friction modifier type oils on it. So a lot of times that OEM basic non-synthetic oil works really well on these clutches. But I have heard good things about switching out the judder spring and running different types of companies' plates and stuff like that. So further down the line, we might experiment with it, but right now I don't have any plans to switch that program. Let's throw in a fun part of this bike that you're not going to see, I don't think, on a lot of XR650Rs, and that is a chainsaw mount. I could be wrong. If you're running a chainsaw mount on your XR650R, let me know in the comments, but the chainsaw mount is from Enduro Engineering. And it's kind of like a bucket of a chainsaw mount. Like, it holds whatever I really need in it. So you can kind of just throw it in there. It has a tie down. The thing I didn't like about it is without this bungee like cord that I added to hold the top of the chainsaw, it moves around quite a bit. So that's just a little mod I added on there. The other modification that you might notice is this light right here. I have an open trail pod light on it. The reason being behind that is, as I was talking about the stator earlier there, it is a 200 watt stator, and instead of splitting out the power into two different 100 watt sections, they're combined. That way I can power a heavier light setup, which, teaser, I guess, will be in a future video after I nail in some electrical stuff, which we'll touch on a little bit here. But I do have to, whenever I'm running the bike, I do have to run this light. As you can see, it's pretty dang bright, but that is to control or basically allow output so I don't have my rectifier burning out with all that 200 watt power outage, or power coming out of the stator. So I do have to run a headlight, and I do have even a little note on here that says on, so hopefully I remember to turn it on. Another important note on the chainsaw mount: I switched out the rubber mounts that came with this bike with hose clamps that were actually off of my Baja Designs like race light mount. So that was to add to the stability on here, because those rubber straps that came with it, I also felt kind of added to the floppiness of this mount, but especially because the 650 has a smaller tubing up here because of the conventional forks. I figured we would go over the controls a little bit. I like the vibes, or whatever you want to call it, just the style of the stock OEM 650R handguards. I feel like running anything else is really weird to me. Normally, I do like to separate the handguard from the lever, so that way I can position the handguard where I want. But you know what, man? Like, they just kind of make this bike look like a 650R, so I need to keep those on there. I do not like removing it. I think it looks kind of dorky. I have a RAM mount on my bike, and this is so obviously I can run my phone on here. Something I plan on adding to my electrical situation is having a USB charger, which my friend Dustin had mounted on his 650. So that way I can power my phone, or in a pinch, power anything I need out there. I could power GoPro batteries for our adventures. So something I just want to add on there. I do have a Scott stabilizer on it. In my opinion, these are the best stabilizers out there. This is just due to the fact that these things do not dampen when you come back to going straight. They just dampen when you're going outbound. And like, Scott Stabilizer is a very reputable brand amongst stabilizers. So that's why I run that guy. Other than that, there's that light switch I was talking about to control my light. And I have the on thing there to try to remember that. But other than that, it's Pro Taper handlebars on there. I'm going to switch those out with some fire powers. But these things have been on there as long as I've had the bike, which I'm trying to tally up that time right now in my head. I've had it around a decade, but it's 2004 bike. These bars came with the bike, so it's been a while. All right, next up, I'm running an IMS tank on it. I believe this one is 3.2. I have my quick fill dealio for my dump cam for when I was racing and stuff. So I used this mainly on races like Vegas to Reno. This bike has done Vegas to Reno twice. One time as I was Ironmanning it, the other time was on a team. And then it's also done the 24 Hours of Glen Helen. And that was when I decided to Ironman it for whatever reason. And of course it was a mud race, so it was pretty muddy conditions out there, and this bike handled just fine. I thought it was kind of a secret weapon for Ironmanning it, just because all the weight's down low and the suspension really absorbed all that chatter and whatnot. But yeah, in case you were wondering what seat cover I like to run, this is an SKDA one. I really like the brown leather style of it. It kind of suits my personality. And so far, you know, I've really liked the seat cover the 2 times I've been able to use it. It's been grippy, hasn't been annoying, and I haven't really gotten, you know, too bad a monkey butt or anything. So I think it's pretty comfortable, and I don't get a lot of that like friction going. But good seat out there, so shout out to those guys. Next up, we got my tail bag. I run this guy. A lot of people ask me if it gets in my way. Not really. I run a fanny pack deal that keeps all my tools and stuff, and sometimes I can feel it on there, but like all the technical and stuff we did, downhills, all that, it hasn't bothered me enough. I think it might be because I'm a taller guy. I'm around 6'2", so I think maybe my butt is clearing that thing, but a lot of the times, no, it doesn't really bother me, and I much rather have like the extra parts and tools, and like I keep maps in here and stuff specific to the 650R that I normally wouldn't keep on like the 350, for example. Next up, we got the exhaust. The header itself is an OEM header, and the silencer is going to be an old beat up Pro Circuit that is hanging on for dear life. There is a broken mount on it right now, and it's only held on by the actual pipe connection to the header pipe, and also the single mount on top of the silencer. I do want to replace the pipe. That is in my plans for this bike, is switching that pipe out, whether it's an FMF or something else, that's fine. But yeah, this thing's hanging on for dear life, so that is on the plan of replacements. Let's talk about the gearing now. I know I talked about in the first episode, I wasn't really sure what I had. I knew my front sprocket was a 13 because I had recently changed that, because I knew I was going to be doing more technical stuff on that. I hadn't changed the rear sprocket yet. It is a 47, I just counted it, and I am running a DDC sprocket on the rear. This thing is invincible. Like, it lasts forever. This single sprocket right here has seen, like I said earlier on the races, the 24 Hours of Glen Helen, which was a mud race. It's seen Vegas to Reno twice, and on top of that, all the riding and stuff that I normally do, and it still looks like this. So amazing sprocket. I do have a firepower chain on it right now. It's the X-Ring chain, and it seems to be doing great, so no complaints there. I do want to change this rear sprocket out to a 50. I do think that's going to help me out a lot in the technical stuff. I don't think I will have to use the clutch as much. I'm trying to avoid using the clutch at all right now, to be honest, so I try to keep my hand off that thing as much as I can, but naturally, due to all the technical and stuff in the mountains, we're going to end up using the clutch, so just thought I'd point that out. Another cool feature on this thing is a trick that my buddy Dustin taught me down when we went to the 1000 this year, so I'm giving him a lot of shout outs on this video, but you can run, if you still have an old school cable bike, you can run a secondary clutch cable zip tied to your clutch cable that is actually attached to the bike as a spare in a pinch. It's a good trail hack, but if you're racing and you need to quickly switch it out because it's snapped, all you have to do is undo the old one and then put in the new clutch like right on top of it, and it's good to go. So it's a fast switch out because I've already routed it in line with the current cable. So nice little shout out. You can also do this with your throttle cables if you have spares of those. And yeah, it's just nice to have the extra parts, especially when you're in the deep woods, and not having a clutch or a throttle cable can really put a bind in your trip. For the rotors, I'm running braking rotors on here. So far they've been good. I did have that overheating issue, which there's a little teaser for episode 3 of Trail Wolf Adventures. You're going to see, and I have another spoiler too that I'm showing you, one heck of an adventure we went on with this. So be watching out for episode 3 to see a little more what I'm talking about. But I do want to switch out the brake line on this thing to a steel braided brake line. That's going to give me a little more rigid feel on my brake, which I like. And we'll see if it affects overheating thing. I think it's going to be more about bleeding out the old fluid that's in here and putting in some fresh stuff that might help it from overheating. But yeah, I'm not too sure if you know that braided brake lines help with overheating or not, or if they add to it because there's metal in there. Leave it in the comments. But yeah, so here's another teaser for you. These issues going on down here with both my brake pedal and my foot peg happen in episode 3. So I'll spare the details of what caused this, but this did want to lead me into another topic of something I want to switch out on this bike. And one of them is going to be like how wide this thing is down here in the foot peg area. Currently, I have wider pegs on these, but due to the woods that we are riding, this thing likes to hit everything. Every rock, everything on the side of the trail. It's just so wide down here. Yeah, as you can see, the foot peg mount itself has bent down and the brake pedal got smashed in. So I'm probably gonna try adding a snake to this brake pedal. Honestly, there's so much inertia with this bike that like the impact that caused this, I don't know like if that cable's just gonna snap or if it's gonna damage whatever I end up attaching it to. But yeah, we're definitely gonna change this situation up a lot. I'm gonna go with the standard pegs on it and bring it down in smaller. I also now need to replace this foot peg mount. For those of you that didn't catch that in the first episode, this is the aftermarket style foot peg mount from Precision Concepts. They made this with a bar that ends up like reaching around the other side of the frame like a hook. So that way when you put the longer bolt that they provide with it, you can put a nut on the other side. And that prevents it from snapping because normally there is no top support thing that reaches around the side of the frame. So this was a mod made to stop that from snapping, like snapping out the bolts and stuff because of how much leverage there was on the foot peg mount. All right, guys, that's the majority of this bike. That's basic breakdown of it. I do have bigger plans for it. I think we're gonna make it a lot more woodsy efficient bike. We'll do a revise thing after I've added some modification updates. I'm sure I'll talk about them trail side and whatnot. If you guys have any questions in the comments about this bike, any tips or tricks that you think I should do to it, because I'm always open ears, please let me know down below. But other than that, me and this bike have seen some things and I've got some special plans for it, and I don't plan to ever get rid of this bike or always have an XR650R to my disposal. I just love this bike. So if you're a fellow 650R fan, let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you down the trail.